to all. This is your strategy consultant and mentor, Prashant. Welcome to part 4 in the series of operational excellence. We are covering problem solving techniques. Hope you guys have enjoyed my last 3 videos and have also watched a few other videos in the other playlists available on my channel, Ahamevyaham. In today's session, we are going to cover about two-wares, the use of two-wares for risk analysis. Just like the last video, even this is going to be quite interesting. So let's begin with two-wares. The use of two-wares as a problem-solving technique is used frequently for risk analysis. And just like my last video, even this method might appear quite simplistic, but it is really very effective. It is a technique for identifying high-risk issues. This technique involves analyzing the operations with a risk-based approach, and it helps you to do a deep dive into operations to fine-tune your processes. If you recall in the last video where I covered the 3 vents technique, it was from a high-level overview talking about systems. Now the two-wares technique is all about processes. This technique allows you to conduct thorough risk analysis from the macro to the micro, that is from the high level to the lowest possible level in your overall operations. What you need to do here is check what can go wrong across your operations, your systems and your processes. Ask where, and remember that you have to ask it just twice. I'll tell you how to do it, how to go about it, and funnel down to the most critical point or the vulnerable point in your operations. And this two-wares is highly effective to perform risk analysis in complex environments. As I just said, that the two-wares can be used to perform risk analysis in complex environments. What you're seeing on the screen right now is a very simplified example so that you can understand this concept very easily. You can see 2 funnels and a table next to it. So let's begin to understand what this is all about. Consider for any organization, every organization, every business exists to serve its customer at the end of the day. So let us kind of oversimplify it and say that your organization has 3 basic processes: process A, process B and process C, in a sequential manner. So the organization carries out these 3 processes and delivers the product or goods or services to the consumer. Now when you have this kind of setup in your organization, what you need to do is, in order to identify where does the high risk hiding in any of these processes, you need to first ask the first where is the issue. And if the answer is yes, you have to look at the input of the process. If the answer is no, you move on and ask once again where is the issue. Here, if the answer is yes, you have to look at the output of the process. And if it is no, then you don't have to ask any more wheres, because remember, this is a two-wares technique. That means if there is no issue at the input or the output, that means the issue is in the process itself. Now, as simple or naive it might sound, it is a very useful exercise to identify potential risks. And how to go about it is, once you get the yes to either of the wheres or 2 no's for both the wheres, you know where the problem lies. It's either at the input or the output or the process. Anything that your organization does can be seen from the perspective of a process, and for every process there is an input, and there is an output, there are certain other factors involved. For example, there are certain control factors, there are certain influencing factors. So we are not going too deep into it, otherwise it would become quite complex to cover in a short video like this. So for the ease of business, let us assume there's an input, there's a process, and there's an output. Now that is at the organizational level. If you look at, like, to mention a simple example, say if it's you're into manufacturing, the input would be raw materials, there's a manufacturing process, and the output would be the end product or the finished goods. Now this can be split down further into your organizational processes. For example, you could have a purchasing or procurement process to source the materials. You could have a receiving and storage process. You could have a goods transit process, material transit process. You could have a material requirements planning process. Even in the manufacturing, you will have several processes depending on the nature of goods, the type of product or services that you're offering. And then there would be a sales process, there would be a delivery or dispatch process. So there can be n number of processes in your organizations, and you can apply this 2 words technique for risk analysis throughout all the processes in the organization. So to understand it better, how to go about it is, let us say at a high level, we are considering process A, process B, process C. So we are first going to funnel it through the 2 words technique and try to identify where is the issue. Is process A, does process A have a high risk issue, or process B or process C? For ease of business, let's say we have arrived at the conclusion that process C has certain high risk issues. So what we do is, we can choose to either split the process C or dive deeper into the process. So if we consider process C as a unit, we can note that even the process C will have certain input and there will be a certain output. So let's take C1 as the input for the process C and C2 as the output. Now going further, if you split it or dive deep further, for C1 itself, there could be an input C11, the process would be C1, and the output could be C12. And this would still be the input end of the process C. At the output end of process C, you would have, since the output is C2, you would have C21 as the input for C2 and C22 as the output. So this is how you would examine each and every process from macro to the micro level by the simple application of this 2 words method. We'll understand it even much better with a real world example. So let's take up the very same standard example that I've been carrying throughout this particular series, which I've covered in part 1, part 2, part 3, and this is part 4. Let's say you have a retail store and you have received reports of increasing levels of shrinkage in your store. Now, shrinkage is a very common issue in the retail industry, and the shrinkage levels of shrinkage, tolerance levels, or the acceptable percentage of shrinkage is predefined. For example, let's say a ballpark figure of 4 to 5% is acceptable, probably in India and Asia. In Africa, the same acceptable level would be inflated to 8 to 10%. While in stark contrast, if you look at Japan, 2 to 2.5% of shrinkage is acceptable. Anything beyond it is a high risk. So it can differ depending on the industry, the nature of goods, the scale of operations, and the region. Now, when it comes to shrinkage, it is common sense that shrinkage is a risk area. But what makes it a high risk? You need to apply your logic and try and understand that the figures that are being presented to you about growing levels of shrinkage at your retail store, are they really valid or not? So what you do is, when you consider shrinkage, you have to look at the processes which have the risk of shrinkage. And again, for the ease of doing business, I have listed out just 3 processes and kind of simplified it. So what you're seeing on your screen is, let's say we have process A, which is about procurement, then we have process B, which is about stores, and there's process C, which is about sales. Now, when you're doing your investigation, and you're asking the two wheres. Now, mind you, as seen on the screen, process A leads to process B leads to process C. For example, if you consider process B, where your problem is occurring, the stores. Process A is the input for it and process C is the output for it. So you have asked the first where is the issue? Is it in process A, that is procurement, and you probably got the answer as no. Then you move on to check the output. Is there any issue in process C? And you realize that yes, there is indeed some issue. So then you split the process further and dive deeper. In the blue boxes that you can see on the screen, process C is split into process C1 and process C2, which is basically point of sales, that is the POS operations within the store, and the return, refunds and reconciliation, which happens at the back end of the store. Now, for process C, process C1 is the input. No sale would happen without the point of sale operation, so that's the input for it. And once a sale is done, what's the final output? You need to do your reconciliation. So this is how the processes are interlinked to each other. And upon investigation, you realize you're utilizing this two-ways technique. You check whether is there any issue in process C1. You get the answer no. Then you ask the next where is the issue? Is it in process C2? And you get an affirmative answer, and you realize that there is certainly some issue in returns, refunds and reconciliation. So you further split it into its own input and output, which is shown as process C21 and C22 in the green boxes, which is basically about point of sale data punching, which is the input for the process C2, and the output of process C2 will be process C22, which is basically auditing and accounting, because once the sale is done, the close of business is done, you obviously need to file your papers, keep your accounting in order. So that's the final output of this process. And then you realize that yes, there is an issue in process C22. What you actually identify here is that process C is basically the output of process B. Process C2 is the output of process C, and process C22 is the output of process C2. In this manner, there is a certain interlinkage, and you have arrived at this purely based on the two-ways technique. And the answer that you find out is that the process C22 is a high-risk area for the below two reasons. A, there are no regular audits being conducted at the store level, and B, shrinkage figures could be either underreported or overreported just because of the reason that there are no regular audits being conducted. That is, there is no cross verification or validation of these figures. So this is how you uncover high risk areas. So if you can recollect, if you have seen my previous videos, we use the same example, same problem statement of shrinkage to apply 5 eyes and the other techniques, and here we are using the same example for applying two ways. Now, in each of these techniques, the purpose or the method of application is different, but the problem at hand is the same. So one needs to be very, very careful and alert while using these different techniques. So let me also cover how not to use two ways. If you engage into this, applying this method, you might say something like, we need to check the process first. Well, do not entertain preconceived notions. The method here is, when you consider a process, you ask the first where at the input and the second where at the output. So without checking the two ends of the process, input or output, you can't directly jump into the process. Then you might miss out on something important. So do not ever entertain preconceived notions. Second is, do not jump to conclusions. Because sometimes thoughts like this can come to your mind that I'm damn sure that there is an issue with the input itself. No, you still need to ask and apply this method in its completeness. You have to use the two wheres. You can't simply ask one where and then jump to a conclusion. And last but not least, the third part is that do not confuse yourself and others. For example, someone in your team might say, let us review the CCTV cameras for checking process B1. Well, you need to understand that the CCTV camera is a system and not a process. So you can't apply a system perspective when you're trying to investigate a process. So do not confuse yourself and others, and be very alert while applying this technique. I hope that I have been able to successfully communicate and make you understand the application of the two wheres method. Stay tuned for more. Hit like, comment and subscribe, because I'll be coming up with many more such videos. Till then, take care. Ciao.